Again, guys, and welcome back to the House of Devlin. I'm Big Al Devlin, and today is a continuation of our Gods of the North. Where I get to tell you about some of the gods of paganism, essentially, but from a Nordic perspective. So I get to tell you about all the gods of the Nordic paganism, and these gods would have been found within virtually all the all the variations of the paganistic faith. Now, before I go on, I just want to say I apologise if I appear to be tired at any point during this video, or if don't seem to be as energetic as I normally am, or as enthusiastic. Trust me, I am. I'm incredibly enthusiastic because this video is dedicated towards my patron goddess Freya. And just to tell you guys, by the way, Freya, the reason she's my patron goddess, I will give you that reason at the end of the video. So hopefully that will keep you tuned so you watch everything, and then at the end, if you don't already know why Freya is my patron goddess, those of you who watch these videos regularly will know why she's my patron goddess, but those of you who don't, it's an interesting story, and it happened 2 years ago, and it involved my death. But there we go. I'll talk about that more at the end. But if I'm for some reason appearing like I've got lethargy, for example, or anything like that, it's because if you may have already seen it, Big Al's day of head tattooing, or whatever it's called, but I got my head tattooed the other day, and my right thigh, 6.5 hours in the tattoo parlor, and my head is not hurting, but I am tired and I have a headache. So I will be giving you this in the best way that I possibly can, but please forgive me, guys, if the pain in my head slows me down just a little bit and I have to take the odd little pause just to kind of work out where I am. But the good thing is I do have a pause button on this camera, so I'll be using it probably to make sure what I'm telling you is right and in the right order. I've also got notes in front of me because there's still a hell of a lot to talk about. I've done one video so far on the gods of the north. This is the second video. The first video was, of course, had to be Odin. You have to start with Odin, right? And what a place to start. I knew when I did it that it would take a long time. I thought it would take about 45 minutes, maybe an hour at tops, but it took about an hour and 20 minutes to do Odin. That's without all his stories and everything. He is a god that's got a lot to talk about. Freya, not as much to talk about, but still a lot. And especially as she's my patron goddess, I've gone to town on researching her, because actually going around, looking around, reading the books, reading the Eddas, the poems, so on and so forth, even reading things like Beowulf, for example, for references and stuff. Not alone like Snorri Sturluson or any of the other Eddas or anything like this. It's interesting. There's not that much information on Freya. It's really annoying. The information on Freya is really hard to find. You have to dig deep, and dug deep I have. So there is a lot of information, guys. This will be a fairly long video, so feel free to have a pause, go get yourself a cup of tea at any point. I mean, it's taking me it'll take me 5 minutes to get started anyway, so you might as well go put the kettle on and just leave me at it, and I'll talk away. It will take some time to get through, because obviously I want to do every single god on the list of gods that I'm going to be doing, which is all of them, apart from maybe some of the minor ones that I've not heard of. I will be doing every single god and goddess in paganism over due time, and I want to give each and every single one of them the justice they deserve. I want to tell you as much as I can about them, even if it's just a single line and ends up being a 2-minute video. Okay, but when it comes to the major gods and goddesses like Freya, you're going to end up with long videos. Okay, so I do apologize about the length of the videos, guys. They're completely unavoidable, unfortunately. If you do a job properly, if you do a job, you'll do it properly, and that's exactly what I'm going to try and do here. So feel free to take any breaks at any point. Anyway, let's get on with it. I always find the best place to start is, of course, the beginning. The beginning regards Freya is really, well, looking at her parents, where she comes from, the world that she comes from, or which realm she comes from, and her ancestry, her bloodlines, okay? What generation of God is she, for example? Things like this. It's very interesting stuff to look at to start off with, because it gives you the background that you need to understand who she is, because you need to know where someone's come from to understand why they are the way they are now, okay? It's hard to understand the present person without knowing the past person, I always find. And it's the same with the gods, okay? Now, Freya was the daughter of Njord. I apologise if I mess up the pronunciations. Njordu and Nerthus. Now, Njord and Nerthus. Now, Njord and Nerthus were twins. That's right. Incest. Okay? So we had incest between two twins. Njord was the king of the sea, or the god of the sea, and Nerthus was queen of the earth, or goddess of the earth. Okay, and they produced two children within their ancestral marriage, Freya and Freya. Okay, you got Freya, which is the female, the one with the A at the end, and Freya, which is Freyr, the male counterpart, her brother. Okay, Freya had a brother that was her twin. Okay, now here's the thing. Yes, they got married too. Freya and Freya were married, but their marriage did not last all too long. It lasted a while, but it didn't last what we would describe the golden age of the Viking period, for example. By that point, it was already abolished. It didn't exist, and I'll get into the reasons why now, really. Basically, Njord, Nerthus, Freya, and Freya are all gods of the tribe, or the tribe of gods called the Vanir. Okay, they are the Vanir gods, the gods of the Vanir, and their homeland is Valheim. Now, Valheim went to war, or the other way around. I'm not sure which way it was. I imagine it was the Asgardians who declared war, actually. But it went to war with Asgard. And it went to war with Asgard for a very long time. Now, Asgard is the heavens, essentially, that you would probably be more aware of, and is populated by the gods of the Aesir tribe of gods. That's Odin, Thor, Tyr. Okay, so we are Loki. These are the gods that we're perhaps more familiar with, and they were very warlike gods that were very powerful, very physically strong, very wise, and they went to war, as I say, with. It was them who declared war. They went to war with the Vanir. Now, you might ask yourself, why did they go to war with that particular tribe of gods? They were obviously at war with the giants. That was another tribe of gods. The only sort of gods they weren't sort of at war with, or godlike beings they weren't at war with, were the dwarfs and the elves, as far as I'm aware. But the reason they went to war with the Vanir, who are at heart a very good set of gods that are very much for life, so we say, and creation. The reason they went to war with them is, in theory, and very much in practice also as well, Valheim is a realm of the Uttengard. Now, if you don't know what that means, I have a video that explains the difference between Uttengard and oh my god. Oh, the Ingard. I lost my memory for a second then. So we have the Uttengard and the Ingard, and Freya and her homeworld of Valheim were very much classified as the Uttengard. That is the side of the cosmos that is seen by those of the Innengard as being chaotic, destructive, wild, all these kind of bad things essentially. But Vandenheim was of the Uttengard. Yes, it was of the Uttengard, because it was slightly chaotic in nature, and rulership was chaotic in nature, as were the gods themselves, slightly chaotic in nature. But they weren't destructive, but they were completely 100% wild, and that never changed. The Vanir and the land of Vandenheim is wild beyond question. Vandenheim is a very verdant grassland, essentially, world, and forest world, where trees grow everywhere. Nature's allowed to blossom, without any sort of restrictions. There's no fortifications. There's no buildings as such. The rivers are allowed to flow in whatever way. There'll be no dams or anything like this. It is literally just a world of nature, and nature is chaotic by virtue. Nature is chaotic by virtue, and so these are gods and goddesses of nature. You've got to remember that these are gods and goddesses of nature, the Vanir. And so, by definition, just because they represent nature, they are of the Uttengard. Nature can be destructive. Nature can destroy. Nature can kill. Nature can kill unjustly also. The innocent, a cold, for example, a common cold, a fever, kills the weak, the old, and that's pretty much it, really. The weak, the old, and the young. Okay, if you're an adult male, the chances of you dying of the common cold or fever, so say you get man flu, the chances of you dying from that is very low. But if you're old or very young, like a baby, or you're weak because you're in hospital, you've been injured or you're ill already, that fever actually could kill you. Okay, and see, that's why nature is seen as cruel, because it tends to sometimes pick on the innocent more so than and the not just the innocent. It picks on the weak, the ones that can't protect themselves. It bullies them essentially, and nature as a result is very much of the Uttengard. And as I say, gods of nature, they have to be default of the Uttengard, but these were not destructive gods or goddesses. They were more than capable of seeing that a cosmos of creation, or where creation is at an apex and destruction is there, but kept under control and is kept at the lowest point. That is by far the best sort of setup possible, because as soon as destruction is allowed to blossom and go out of control, then everything's destroyed. Nature and everything. All life is destroyed. And of course, that is called Ragnarok in the words of the Nords and the Vikings, okay? Apocalypse, okay? And so, don't get me wrong, the Vanir knew and understood that the Uttengard was not good, but they were still part of it, but they were not bad parts of the Uttengard. They are one of the examples of how the Uttengard can be a good thing in many respects. Okay, but of course, Asgard, being that of the Innengard, have responsibility, they have justice, they have the responsibility to destroy all that is of the Ursengard, and so they went to war with the gods of Vandenheim, because they were of the Ursengard. And that war went on for eons, ages and ages and ages, and the war went on so long that the gods and goddesses of both sides, both the Aesir and the Vanir, decided enough was enough. They're either gonna kill each other, because they were perfectly matched. The Vanir were not a weak tribe of gods. They were an incredibly powerful tribe of gods, very versed with magic. Whereas the Aesir were very versed with physical capabilities more often than not. Excluding Odin, who was one of the few exceptions who actually used magic, but the Vanir were the masters of magic, and so they had magic, they had strength, and overall, in the end, they just gave up. They said we've got to put a ceasefire. We've got to have not just a ceasefire but an alliance. In the end, they did create an alliance, and in the formation of that alliance, they all spat into an urn. And all their spittle came together to create an individual, a man, believe it or not, called Kvosya. And that is in the story of Mead and Poetry, which please go watch. It's an interesting story because Kvosya doesn't have the best of times, and he ends up in the possession of Odin again, eventually, after a while. But he has some time in Midgard. Perhaps not much time, but he has some time spent on Midgard. But he's the wisest man to have ever lived, Kvosya, because of course he has the wisdom of all the gods, all their spittle coming together. He has all the wisdom at this one single point in time where they've all decided peace is the way to go. They were all being wise, all making a wise decision, and he became the wisest of all men to have been born or created. But eventually there was peace. But during that peace, Freya were sent as hostages, so to speak, to the Asgardians, and the Asgardians sent two of their own to Vandenheim, just so that if anyone kicked off, the hostages could eventually be killed. They were not seen as hostages, they were not prisoners, they could do as they will, but obviously if war began, they were nearby enough to be able to be killed. It was a way of putting off war happening again, because the relationship between the Vanir, and that includes Freya, the Vanir and the Asgards is not the best. It's fine. There is peace and they do work together, but it's not like they're not super buddies or anything. They're not holding hands. Let's put it that way. But one thing that happened was, of course, when Freya went to Asgard, their marriage together, because they themselves were twins. And they were also the products of incest. Their marriage was abolished by the Asgardians. It was illegal in Asgard to have incest, and so their marriage was just broken down. It was abolished, and it was deemed illegal. And so Freya remarried, and that is a fact that a lot of people don't know about, because Freya remarried. Freya remarried under a different name. She married under the name Frigg, and you will know Frigg. Frigg is Odin's wife. She married Odin, but when she was Odin's wife, or playing the role of Odin's wife, she took on the name Frigg, which meant the beloved. But when she was being herself, her true self, when she was being her more wildlike nature and doing what she wanted to do, when she wasn't supporting her husband, when she was just going off doing her own thing, she was Freya, which translates as the lady. Okay. Now, currently, Freya lives in Asgard. Okay, and has lived in Asgard ever since the exchange. She's never gone back to Valheim other than maybe to visit or whatever, but she doesn't live in Valheim anymore, and she lives in her hall, or palace as we would call it today, but back then they would have called it a hall, called Rumnir. Okay, and that was the name of a palace, and outside of a palace of Rumnir was a field called Folkvangir, and Folkvangir is where the dead men that she collected were brought back. It was her heaven essentially that she gave to men. Because one of the things about Freya was she was many things. She was, let me just read to you now. I should have done this at the beginning. She was the goddess of love, war, sex, gold, beauty, sorcery, stroke magic, and death. And in her role of death, she created Folkvangir, and this is essentially her afterlife that she created for mankind. Okay, and Folkvangir just means the meadow of the dead, or the meadow of the army, or the meadow of the men. Essentially, it translates into a lot of different things, but it's essentially just a meadow, and that meadow even though it may be part of Asgard, is very similar to Valheim. It's very grassy. It's very, like, lots of trees, lots of babbling brooks. It reminds her of her home because, of course, she's it is her home. Folkvangir is Freya's home within Asgard, and even though she may have a palace or hall called Sessrumnir, it exists within that field, that meadow, and she, of course, wants to be surrounded by things that remind her of home, as anyone would. Okay, so as I discussed, she is the goddess of many different things. Okay, and I had actually written it down here. Okay, I mentioned it too soon, but I'll mention it again. She's the goddess of love, war, beauty, gold, sex, sorcery, and death. I think I missed the gold bit out on the last time that I read it out. Now, regards to beauty, okay, aspect of beauty. Why was she the goddess of beauty? Well, her beauty was unmatched, and it was admired by not only the gods and goddesses that she came across. Not only was she, goddesses jealous and gods lusted after her, but dwarfs, men, women, even the beasts themselves were calm around her. They were all in admiration of her beauty. So even animals were calm around her because of her beauty. She was the goddess of beauty, and she is described as having golden hair and porcelain white skin, although this appearance often changes according to the aspect that she is representing. So, for example, that's her in her aspect of beauty, but if she's representing another aspect, for example, she'll often be described slightly differently. So her looks as such are not like 100% absolutely 100% this, but the one thing is that she definitely had this golden hair that was beautiful, and she had pale white skin, and she typically wore blue gowns normally, but she would wear green gowns from time to time and stuff like that, as I say, according to whatever aspect she was trying to represent at the point in time. Now, I'm also going to talk about her being the goddess of gold, or gold and wealth, but specifically gold. Okay. How is she the goddess of gold? Well, she just is, but she also cries gold. Whenever Freya gets unhappy and starts crying, tears will run down her cheeks, and as they do, instead of turning into diamonds, as you sometimes have heard or seen in Hollywood movies, the tears turn into gold, and as they drip off her face, they become gold, pieces of gold, and that to her has always been an ability she's always had. And in addition to this, she also has two cats, which are shamanistic projections, and I'll mention them again later because she is a magic practitioner. I will get onto magic in a little while. In fact, actually, I'll get into magic straight after this. Or actually, I might as well get into magic. I'll mix magic and gold together. Gold, she cries gold. Okay, done. And she has golden hair. Done. Okay, but she also has two cats that are shamanistic projections because she was a shaman. She had the ability to perform shamanistic magics. She was also a Seder practitioner. She was also practiced in runic sight. The only magic that I don't think she practiced was necromancy. That was the only magic that I don't believe she ever used. Unlike Odin, who did use necromancy. The only way that she would have used necromancy would have been to possibly bring back the dead from the battlefields to Folkvangir, but it was never used to her advantage. Odin used necromancy all the time. You know, he would just go up to a dead body, raise it, and talk to it, get its wisdom, and then kind of let it just go back to death. If it bored him, just let it, kill it again, or it just let it go off if it was interested in him and thought, oh, it might be funny to let it go down to the pub and cause havoc. So Odin was a bit different, but Freya didn't misuse necromancy at the very least. The only way that she would have used it would have been to help bring back the spirits of the dead back to her heaven, Folkvangir. Okay, how she did so, no one knows. Of course, everyone knows that the Valkyries were the spiritual projections that Odin used to bring back the dead back to Valhalla. But no one knows how Freya did it. Whether she did it herself, whether she used shamanistic projections, no one knows. It's not written down, and if it is, then it hasn't been found yet. Okay, so that's something to look forward to finding out if we ever do find that out. Okay, but as I said, she also had two cats that were shamanistic projections, just like Jerry and Frecky, for example, Hugin and Mugen. Okay, the ravens and the dogs of and the Valkyrie themselves, the shamanistic projections of all these were shamanistic projections of Odin. She had two cats that were shamanistic projections, and they were called Tree Gold and Bee Gold. Okay, and they actually pulled a chariot that occasionally Freya would ride upon. So they must have been quite big cats. I don't think they were domesticated cats. I think they were probably the size of close to lions or tigers or something similar. Wildcats at least anyway, because to pull a woman on a chariot, they would have had to have some kind of strength. But Bee Gold and Tree Gold was their names, and of course they were called that because Bee Gold is honey. Okay, and she had an association with honey. She had any association with anything that was gold. It didn't have to be the metal gold. Okay, and a Tree Gold is of course amber. And so if you wanted to give a gift to a lady and give it to her in the name of Freya, to say, oh, I want to give you this gift, may Freya watch over you, you would give her perhaps a golden ring with amber set in the middle, and you'd give her honey and bread for breakfast or something. I don't know where the honey bit would come into it, but amber and gold were definitely part of her aspects. Her last and final animal that she had, and I will say animal because I don't believe that this was a shamanistic projection. This was magic. She used magic to have a boar follow her around called it depends if I can read my writing. Hildisfini. Hildisfini. Okay, which meant like war boar basically. And Hildisfini was a boar that she would ride from time to time, and she would ride into battle if she ever went fighting, or she would just ride just to ride. But the joke was is that when she said, "Oh, I'm just going to go out for a ride on Hildisfini," is that Hildisfini was actually her lover, a secret lover called Otar, and Loki was the one who knew that the truth behind this, and he would often call her like a harlot and things like this for going for a ride on Hildisfini, and no one understood. Why, Loki? Why every time she just says she's going to go out for a ride on Hildisfini into the woods? Why do you always mock her? Why do you always call her out and call her a harlot or whatever? Why do you use such horrible words? Well, it's because he knew that Otar was Hildisfini just in disguise, disguised as the boar. And of course she was, of course, committing adultery against Odin by doing so. So I suppose it's probably best that Loki did keep it to himself. But regards sex as a whole, well, she was the god of sex, or goddess of sex, and she did use her sexual nature to her advantage. For example, there was a necklace that was once produced by the Brisling brothers. The Brisling brothers were dwarfs, okay, and as we know, dwarfs were mastersmiths. They created Thor's hammer, for example. And they created Odin's spear and things like this. They created miraculous inventions that would be, even to imagine, even today, would be like, wow, how would you even go about that? It's proper sci-fi sort of stuff. Some of the stuff they made was amazing, okay? And they created the Brisling brothers this beautiful golden necklace of immense power. Now, it's never discussed what power the necklace had. I don't know what power the necklace had, and I will not even try to guess what the power was, because my guess is as good as yours. But for it to be as powerful, it must have been very powerful and very beautiful, because when Freya saw the necklace, she went to the Brisling brothers and said, "I will give you everything, and I mean everything that I possess,